this organized as best as possible. A lot of people have sent me a link of an interview that Moeletsi Mbeki did on Morning Live with Sakina. The video is about how the South African economy serves foreign interests. I haven't watched the video, I think it's 3 weeks old now. I haven't watched the video or the interview at all. And today I actually took time out to actually watch it. I watched it, I made notes, did a bit of research, very little research that I want to share with you. And I decided I'm going to try and do this video and speak about this very, very important interview that Sakina conducted with Moeletsi Mbeki. Moeletsi Mbeki is the brother of ex-president Thabo Mbeki. He is an economist in his own right. He's a businessman as well. And I do think he's a really, really great thinker. During my varsity years, I used to have a huge issue with Moeletsi. I thought he was arrogant. I thought he was detached, all these nice terms. But as the years have gone by, I've come to appreciate a lot of his thoughts and his views, which tend to be alternative and tend to paint the ANC as well as these bad guys for the black masses. So let me try and get through this as quickly as possible. I'm going to begin by highlighting some of the things that he spoke about that stood out for me. Thereafter, I want to read some data I found on the internet. And then after that, I'm going to give a few of my thoughts as well. So some of the things that stood out was a historic lesson from Moeletsi. Moeletsi starts off by talking about how a lot of black people in particular believe that the inequalities we have today are as a result of the apartheid government, the National Party. He begs to differ, and he actually says it's the British that are responsible for the inequality we have today. And then he goes back to give a history lesson, speaking about how the British actually controlled South Africa after they colonized it. They controlled South Africa from the end of the 18th century. From the end of the 18th century until, I believe, he mentions 1910. I could be wrong. Thereafter, he speaks about the 3 economies that the British enforced. The first one being a slave economy that they inherited from the Dutch, having slaves and exploiting slaves. They had that for 35 years, according to him. Thereafter, they abolished slavery, and then they had a peasant economy, more especially in KwaZulu, KZN, KwaZulu-Natal, and also in the Eastern Cape. And from there, he also mentions that there were huge sugar fields, and they created or they made or they grew sugar in KwaZulu, and the Zulus were very adamant that they refused to work on the sugarcane fields. And that's how it came to be that the British brought in Indians to come in and work the sugarcane fields in KZN. And as some of you may know, Indians in Durban account for the most number of Indians in any particular geography anywhere else in the world outside of India itself. After the peasant economy, the third economy was then the mineral economy, when they discovered diamonds and gold. And from there, they forced Africans to then go and work in the mines to ensure that they become rich from there. And he says that from 1910 to today, with that economy, you find that the British still, by and large, own a lot of our mines. They still make a lot of money from our mines. And in effect, nothing much has changed. What happened is that at some point, the Afrikaners then put their hands up, the elite Afrikaners, and they said, look, we'll control these blacks. We will oppress them, we will exploit them and get their cheap labor so that they work for you. And in effect, that's how the National Party got to take over the country and the government. But that National Party was still serving the British, who were still making the bulk of the money from the mines. Because it became untenable for black Africans, they then looked for a black party who would come in and do the same thing. And they found that in the African National Congress, the ANC, which today is the elite blacks who do the same, exploiting black labor cheaply for the benefit of largely British-owned mines. One of the things that he said, I just need to find, was the fact that the British had been supporting the ANC for a while before the end of apartheid, because the ANC actually had an office in London from 1960. I thought that was quite interesting. He spoke about BEE, spoke about the black elite, spoke about privilege. Just want to make sure I've covered everything in terms of the historical part. Okay, so 1994, the ANC came in, and up to today, the ANC still leads. Very important. He spoke about the black elite that have been created since 1994, which are a very, very small minority. Very interesting thing he pointed out, millionaires that work for government. These are people that earn over 1 million rand per year. And he speaks about the fact that these guys will never let go of their privilege. The same way white people won't let go of their privilege, because they know that if we are to transform our economy, they will lose the benefits that they have. So they need, just like the whites needed before them, the black masses to be exploited as cheap labor for their benefits and for their privileges. And it's important for you guys to understand that he's speaking about over 29,000 millionaires, but anyone in this country is earning over 15,000 rand, 20,000 rand a month is privileged. The average black employee earns 3,600, and the average black family member lives on 750 rand per month. So in effect, if you were asked to share your privilege, anyone earning above 3,600 would be asked to share their money. If you're earning 20,000, we'd say share your money and keep 5 or keep 10. If you're earning 50,000, we'd ask you to share 30 to 40,000. And you speak about white privilege and extreme white wealth. Because of the high inequality, I think South Africa is still known as the most unequal country in the world. We want white people to share, but in that same conversation, what will come out is, are black people who are earning well willing to share with the poor as well? And the answer is going to be no. As soon as you become privileged, you want to protect your privilege no matter what it takes. And we saw Cyril Ramaphosa acting on behalf of London Mining, Lonmin, getting over 40 miners that ended up being killed. We're not saying Cyril was guilty. We're saying he did send the email that asked for concomitant action to be taken, which eventually led to the gunning down of miners who died. Being a security guard, Manchingelane, a protector of privilege of the British, as Moeletsi Mbeki spoke about it. Very important to know, our GDP, gross domestic product, that's how much money we generate as a country, currently sits at 400 or just over 415 billion US dollars as of last year. 415 billion US dollars, which is roughly 6.4 trillion rand. One of the things Moeletsi highlighted was the fact that South Africa's government is the most expensive government in the world when you look at it from a relative GDP perspective. Our government costs us 14% of GDP. And he says comparable nations like us normally cost, their governments cost between 6 to 7%. So our government is extremely expensive. And one of the pieces of data that I know is that our government officials cost 40% of our national budget every year. 40% of all the tax money and the loans that are raised actually go to paying salaries for our government employees, including members of parliament and the president and the deputy and the cabinet. Am I missing anything? Nope. The last things I think he highlighted that are important for me at least was the fact that South Africa is boiling. We're treading water. We're boiling and there have been minor explosions. He speaks about Marikana as one. He spoke about the rioting and the looting that happened last year as another one, of which apparently over 300 people died. And I think Sakina, if it's not Moeletsi, speak about how that was comparable at that time with the number of people that had been killed in Ukraine in a supposed war. South Africa is not under war, but people are dying because we're not happy. And our police and our government, by and large, sat by, folded their arms and didn't do much. There have been a lot of controversies, and obviously there have been commissions that have been set up now to investigate that stuff. But as we know, not much is going to happen. So they say that they think there's going to be bigger explosions that are going to come, and we don't know what's going to happen because there's no transformation that's happening in our economy, uplifting the masses of our people. And that's where Moeletsi spoke about the fact that the privileged elite obviously don't want to let go of their privilege as well. So they also want to sit back and watch the explosion of the country. Some of the research that I've done myself, because I wanted to know when he speaks about mining and he says we're serving the British in particular, who are the foreigners that he says we're serving. I went and I pulled data. If you go onto Google and you type in on Google search, who owns South African mines, you will find a document from WikiLeaks. I don't know how accurate this document is, but you know, it's a good I guess, platform to gauge, and then you can always challenge from there. So this Microsoft Word document starts off, or rather it breaks down the different countries that own mines in South Africa. Starts off with the unknown and unsure owners, and then it goes into a split between two countries, goes into Australian companies that own South African mines, Canadian companies, Chinese companies that own South African mines, French companies, a German company, a Dutch company, the Netherlands, a Russian company, a Spanish company, and then there's a long list of South African-owned mines that are in South Africa. And then at the bar, no, then they go into Switzerland, they go into the United States, and then they go into a list of South African mines that are owned by companies based in the United Kingdom. It's a really long list, so I'm not going to read that out here. That's why I said you can go to Google, you can search for that, and you can go through it at your leisure. Mining in 1970 in this country accounted for 21% of our GDP. Today, it accounts for 6%, or rather, as of 2011, it accounts only for 6%. But at the same time, 60% of our exports come from mining in particular, mostly raw minerals, because we are known as a country that doesn't beneficiate our minerals. What that means is we take out a raw mineral, we don't work on it to create a final product. We export it elsewhere, maybe to a Switzerland or the Netherlands or Belgium, and then they come and they add value to it. And something that we maybe sold for 10 Rand gets brought back to South Africa, and then we buy it maybe for 1,000 Rand. When I look up the South African economy in particular, you can find that on Wikipedia if you search Economy of South Africa. I just want to read some of the data that's here, which is important for you guys to note. In 2019, the country was the world's largest producer of platinum, the world's largest producer of chromium, the world's largest producer of manganese, the second largest world producer of titanium, the world's 11th largest producer of gold, the third worldwide producer of vanadium, the sixth largest world producer of iron ore, the 11th largest world producer of cobalt, and the 15th largest world producer of phosphate. South Africa was the world's 12th largest producer of uranium in 2018. Gives a brief history of when mining blew up in South Africa, giving the date in the Orange River, founded by Erasmus Jacobs or Jacobs, 1867, the discovery of diamonds there. It goes into history there as well. Though mining's contribution to the national GDP has fallen from 21% in 1970 to 6% in 2011, it still represents almost 60% of exports. The mining sector accounts for up to 9% of value add. In 2008, this is now the share, because we spoke about largest. Now we're speaking about the volume. In 2008, South Africa's estimated share of world platinum production amounted to 77%. That's of global platinum production, 77% is South African. Kyanite and other materials, 55%. Chromium, 45% of the world's share. Palladium, 39%. Vermiculite, 39%. Vanadium, 38%. Zirconium, 30%. Manganese, 21%. Rutile, 20%. Ilmenite, 19%. Gold, 11% of the world's gold is produced in South Africa. Fluorospar, 6%. Aluminium, 2%. Antimony, 2%. Iron ore, 2%. Nickel, 2%. And phosphate rock, 1%. South Africa also accounted for nearly 5% of the world's The country's estimated share 7%, vanadium 23%, manganese 19%, rutile 18%, fluorospar 18%, gold 13%, phosphate rock 10%, ilmenite 9%, and nickel 5%. It is also the world's third largest coal exporter. That's how big mining is in this country. When we speak about Patrice Motsepe being the richest black person in this country, one of the wealthiest Africans on the continent, when we speak about people like Cyril Ramaphosa with Shanduga, when we speak about Tokyo Sehwale with Imvela Panda, when we speak about Sipho Nkosi, who was involved in Exaro, when we speak about Osaki Matozoma, or Lazarus Zim, or Dr. Anna Mokhokong, when we speak about Mutsipe, we speak about these people that have become wealthy, being given a share of the mining in this country. And at the time, we thought they were sharing the economy with the black people, but we don't know if, in effect, as we saw with Cyril Ramaphosa, if their job was just to become glorified security guards for the wealthy. The British, as I mentioned, all of these other countries in the world who depend on our government to protect their interests, and then even the white Afrikaners who are involved in mining as well. Because, like I said, mining has gone down to 6% of our GDP. I went and I looked up some of our other parts of the economy. Agriculture, which is a big employer in the country, accounts for about 3% of GDP. Manufacturing accounts for about 15% of GDP and about 13% of all jobs. What was interesting for me to note is that our automobile industry, cars, we produce, the cars that we produce account for 10% of South Africa's exports and about 7.5% of GDP. BMW, Ford, Volkswagen, Daimler Chrysler, General Motors, Nissan, and Toyota all have production plants in South Africa. Large component manufacturers with bases in the country are often exhaust, Bloxwich, Corning, and Senior Flexonics. It's very important because they feel that our labor is still cheaper than other developed nations in terms of that. There's telecoms, there's services, there's tourism, there's the informal sector as well in terms of our economy. I think I'll stop there with the research. Lastly, Sakina asked Moeletsi Mbeki a very important question at the end. She asked, do you think political parties are the only solution for the South African masses? I held my breath and I was saddened and disappointed, but not surprised by Moeletsi Mbeki's response. He said he believes South Africans still want democracy because they feel the National Party had a dictatorship under apartheid, and he feels that politics and governments are still the only solution for the South African people. I'm disappointed because I agree. Many, if not most, if not almost all South Africans believe that the solution lies with politics. And I believe that is not true. I believe part of what has been stripped of the South African masses, speaking about normal South Africans, speaking about normal Indians, speaking about normal colored people, speaking about normal Chinese people in this country who work hard for their money, who make 10,000, 20,000, maybe 50,000 a month, and are not making 500,000, a million a month. A lot of these people have been convinced and colonized to believe that government is the only solution. If there's a pothole in the road, government. If there's no job, government. If something is going wrong, government. And by doing that, you end up giving government all this power. You end up giving politicians all this power. One of the things that Moeletsi spoke about is the fact that in 1994, the ANC got 70% of the vote. That means people believed in the ANC majorly. At the last local elections, the ANC got 45% of the votes, meaning South Africans are losing faith in the ANC. But who are they giving their faith to? The Economic Freedom Fighters, the EFF, the Freedom Front Plus, the Democratic Alliance, the DA. And are those people any different to the people that are in charge now? Or will they also be serving foreign interests? One of the things I've said about this country is that we are a glorified farm that feeds the world. We are a glorified factory which manufactures for the world, like I said, with the automobile industry. We are glorified laborers. We are a second-hand country. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange is 40% foreign owned. And that's just the JSE. If you go to some of the biggest companies in this country, if you go to some of the biggest farms, if you go to some of the biggest factories and you go and you see who owns it there, it might be a South African person on paper, but of German descent, of French descent, of Spanish descent, of Chinese descent. A lot of the informal sector, so to speak, is run by Asians. We've got issues now where we speak about illegal, undocumented foreigners, immigrants, obviously buzzword being Operation Tudula and Tlantla Lux. We see a lot of foreigners that are also running the economy at the bottom. Black South Africans, by and large, are not active participants. And we feel that government is our only solution. And that really, really breaks my heart. I think South Africans need to reclaim their minds. Your minds have been taken. Stephen Bantu Biko said the most powerful tool for the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. You need to take your mind back from the politician. You actually even need to take your mind back from the businessman and from money. Because after politics, the next question becomes, do you think the only solution to this country is jobs and money? And Penwell will tell you, no, no. Our forefathers could work the land for themselves. They didn't have jobs. They worked for themselves and for their families. Their wives, our forefathers, their wives worked for the family. They worked the land. Their children worked for the family. They didn't beg for jobs somewhere else, serving other families and other interests. And they didn't need money. A lot of you have been captured by money because money is just a means to an end. You have money so that you can go buy food. But if you grow your own food, you don't need that middleman called money. If you can learn to build your own home with your own hands, using sand, using rock, using water, you do not need money to go and buy a house. You do not need money to go and pay a bond. If you can transport yourself and breed horses, or if you can learn to manufacture and dig iron ore out of the ground and manufacture your own steel products. And South Africa produces cobalt. I believe we produce lithium. We generate oil. We can create petroleum. Some of the cool things that the apartheid government did was build companies such as Sasol, Eskom, Isco, Telkom, so that we know we can do for ourselves. You don't need the money if you can work for yourself. The people that built the pyramids were not building the pyramids because they gave people jobs and they were paying them. There was probably a lot of exploitation. There was probably a lot of slave labor. The bottom line is that you don't need jobs. You don't need money. You don't need government to own your destiny and to be self-sufficient. Juche, I think it's Juche, is the term in North Korea, kwa Kim Jong-un, where they speak about self-sufficiency, doing for self, growing your own food, owning your own destiny. The Afrikaans people, and it's still strong in a place like Orania, believe very much in a boer maak 'n plan. A man must find a way to make means. I think the Black Consciousness movement was pushing that. The Nation of Islam in America with Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, were very big proponents of this. Some of the guys who are leaders in Pan-Africanism stand for this because the people that are in power, they make sure that they enslave even your kings and your chiefs with money. They make sure that they enslave your political leaders with money, your religious leaders with money. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call. You have to take your own destiny, and what I'm saying is very dangerous, because if you guys buy into what I'm saying, it's going to mean that you no longer see a need to vote because you're like, politicians aren't going to help me. You don't see a need to go and work for someone else because you're like, I'll work for myself. And even if the World Bank and the IMF are like, no, we'll give you loans, we'll give you money, you're like, we don't need that. We have got our bodies and we've got our minds. We've got this land, we've got these minerals, and we are going to work it for ourselves to benefit us. And then if we have access extra, we will then share it with the rest of you. But unfortunately, our minds have been colonized and the propaganda is insane. When you watch television, when you read newspapers, when you look at videos on social media, it's all about soft life, materialism. Have you bought this car? Don't you want this skin product? Don't you want nice hair and wigs and weaves? What watch are you wearing? A man who loves himself must get this cologne. Are you eating food from Woolies? So that you can buy into this concept of, I need money. Money makes the world go round. A woman won't look at you unless you're making money. How do you make money? By getting a job. So now you're enslaved in this job, working for a few families that run our economy. South African families and global families. And you work for them and you become slave labor for them without realizing it. But you're proud of yourself because they give you trinkets in the form of a flat, in the form of a house that you are bonded, enslaved for 20 years to pay off. You have debt for a car. Your children have to be sent to these schools and you pay high fees for a school that is training your child to become a slave worker like yourself. Because you cannot fathom the idea of owning your destiny, of having a piece of land for yourself and working the land for your benefit. When I speak about raise your children to work for you, it sounds crazy. No, children must be free to explore. No, what they're telling you is that your children must be free to go out and work for others. When we speak of a concept called independence, when people say, when are you leaving your parents' home? You must be independent. They are talking about you leaving, working and living with your parents, working for and living with your parents, and going to live elsewhere under some other foreign landlord's land. If not that, then you're paying a bond to a foreign bank. When you look at some of the Asians in this country, when you look at some of the immigrants in this country, some of the Black Africans that come here, they all live together in one space and they work for themselves and they uplift themselves, they pull themselves up from their bootstraps. That's what's important in this country, and nothing is going to change. Those of you who think voting for certain political parties is going to work, it won't. Those political parties beg for funding. They beg for funding for their campaigns, and they need to beg from the business people. The business people obviously are serving themselves, and they're serving whatever foreign interest that they have. That's the nation we have. Once minds are opened, we can, ideas like borders, ideas like provinces, ideas like languages, religions can be completely dismantled, and we can build and sculpt a fictional world that suits us. We can create laws that suit us. We don't have to follow Roman Dutch law. We don't have to follow the borders, as what Julius Malema and them say. We can sculpt our reality that serves us. And it doesn't matter if they threaten you with a gun. It doesn't matter if they threaten you with books, if they threaten you with diseases. You will be so mentally liberated, and your liberated, lit mind will light the minds of others such that you will never be captured by anyone except the person who wants to serve you and your people so you can live better. I think I'll stop there. Penuel the Black Pen, Moeletsi Mbeki's interview with Sakina. Let me get Sakina's surname. Kamwendo, Sakina Kamwendo, a really great personality and interview and present on Morning Live on SABC2 and SABC TV, along with another great mind, Leanne Manas, there as well. Hope you guys will have a great day. Stay open in your mind, and let's work to serve ourselves and serve our families and serve our communities and serve our people. Join Penuelism. Penuelism is the answer. Penuelism is the future. Cheers.